So my task is to introduce you to the topic. What is the topic? If I'm looking at the program, I see a lot of institutions, and we heard already that it is about accountability, this learning retreat. So my endeavor is to link the discussion about those concrete institutions we'll be talking about to a broader picture in the beginning, so we can frame our thinking a little bit in the light of a bigger picture. So what are the common features of all those commissions and institutions we'll be talking about during this week? It's the idea of independence and the idea of state institution. In a way, this is a tension. We have state institutions, which are part of a state, but they are supposed to be independent and have an independent role. We will see during the week, I think, that there will be different kinds of independence, different forms, different qualities of independence. But still, there will be this tension between the state institution, part of the state, and the independence. So I will try to go a little bit to the state institutions' functions, so that we can see what is the purpose of having independent state institutions. The big issues will be legitimacy and accountability. How do these institutions relate to legitimacy and accountability? With a strong focus on accountability. Oversight is a key issue of accountability. We will come back to that later. And then we will try to position the different actors around accountability in the landscape of the public sphere. We will come back to this later. So let's start with the functions. What are the functions of independent state institutions? Let's maybe make a step back. Why are we talking about state institutions? What is the state for? I think it's very important to see that the state is key for many issues. State institutions are needed for setting a frame for civil society. Without the state, civil society is lost somewhere out. There are no norms, no rules which are shared by a bigger community than the village or the clan or whatever. So we need the state and the state institutions to frame the reference, to give a reference frame for all the civil society actors. We need it for delivering services. State institutions do deliver services. And state institutions are also key for ensuring a peaceful situation, a peaceful relation between different groups. So the state is important, state institutions are important. And the constitutions and the laws are setting the tasks for these state institutions. This is the basis of accountability. The tasks, the legal tasks, the constitutional responsibilities that institutions have, this is the frame of accountability. And also part of the state, public money is collected by the state and also used for financing tasks. So the idea is that this state, which I just described, is performing. And how to ensure performance? And here the independent state institutions come into the game. Independent state institutions are there for ensuring legitimacy for certain tasks. The election management should not be in the responsibility of the executive who is depending on the election. So for this task, it's much more legitimate to have an independent state institution, still linked to the state, but having a certain independence, which makes it much more acceptable by the political opposition. We have other specific tasks which are given to an independent state institution, such as the High Council for selecting judges or prosecutors. There are different kinds of such independent state institutions performing specific tasks because it's more legitimate to have an independent institution. And then we have, and we will be talking a lot about those kind of institutions, independent oversight institutions, which are very much important for ensuring accountability. We're just coming back to that. So it's about legitimacy of the process and about accountability. Why do we talk about accountability and legitimacy in development cooperation? The role of the state in development and development cooperation has been discussed over the decades, last decades, for many variants, I think. And development cooperation was not so much convinced that the state is really needed in development for a long time. Particularly, SDC was focusing very much on civil society partners, and it still does, and it makes sense. But still, I think there is an increased also perception that state functions are needed. You can't make development without the state performing correctly. And this is why we are talking about governance and accountability, and we are talking about ways how to support accountability. There was a phase, I think, in development cooperation where much money went to the support to line ministries to perform, directly to perform and to deliver services. And many projects were set up within ministries or together with ministries. Talking about accountability goes one step further. It says that, in fact, you have to ensure that the ministries do perform, not doing their work, and not helping them directly to do their work, but trying to make sure that they sustainably do their job in a correct way. So this is a little bit another way of supporting performance if you're talking about independent state institutions overseeing the ministries. And in a way, this is the first point I made. Accountability ensures that government action meets the stated objectives and responds to the needs of citizens. The second one is also very much linked to the democratic idea. In a way, the state is seen as responsible towards citizens. It's not a state which is just doing something and grabbing money from everyone and using it for private purposes. It is a state performing in the interest of citizens. And accountability is just about that. It is trying to ensure that the responsibilities are taken seriously and the citizens can take it seriously also, and they have a better relation with the people on power, and the power is more legitimate. So this makes the whole public system much more sustainable. This is why we are talking about accountability. Legitimacy also enhances acceptance and effectiveness of government and builds trust in situations of fragility. The example of election management shows that, in fact, the trust building is very important also. And these 3 bullets, they are all positive. In fact, we always have quite a negative idea of accountability. It's just criticizing and saying, no, you're not doing well. But in the theory of change behind is very positive. But sometimes it is about criticizing people, and this is a challenge also. Nevertheless, accountability is a key factor of sustainable development. It has been anchored in the SDGs, SDG 16, which says accountable institutions are most important for development. But it was also already mentioned before in all these texts about aid effectiveness. Aid effectiveness is only possible in a context of accountability. And SDC, in the new dispatch on international cooperation, is stressing accountability quite a lot. You find this word in many contexts. It's a cross-cutting issue everywhere. So let's go to this accountability idea a little bit more concrete. Accountability is a relation between 2 different institutions or persons. It's a relational issue. One person or institution is performing a task, and the other is overseeing or directing or has the right to influence the actor on this. It is part of governance, and that is also very important, I would say. You have the principles of governance on the right-hand side in this circle. It is important not to isolate accountability too much. I remember one anti-corruption commission I had to evaluate a long time ago. They were specifically focusing on corruption cases involving the political opposition and not dealing with the cases which were happening in their own political party. So this is really very much against non-discrimination, and I think this is very important also that oversight commissions and institutions, they do also have in mind that they have to be transparent, to respect the rule of law, which is the reverence in many cases, that they also have to go out and be participatory, that they also have to be effective and efficient. Another aspect, accountability is a very abstract word, you will agree probably. What is it exactly? And normally people say that it has 3 dimensions. It is about transparency. That means that a government unit has to inform about its decision. If a municipality wants to establish a landfill somewhere in the country, it has to inform the citizens. The second one is answerability. People have to be able to challenge, to ask for justification. Why did you put the landfill here and not on in the other corner, neighboring the other municipality? You have to to be able to challenge, and the government has to respond to this challenge and argue. And the third aspect is enforceability, and this means if, and only if, the municipality is not respecting the rules, then it has to be sanctioned. So the idea of accountability is does not equal just challenging a decision and making it void. It is about the process of the decision which has to be looked at. But not every claimant can claim to annul a decision and he or she gets right. It's not that everybody has the right to challenge the decision as a decision, but it can challenge the process of deciding. Important to note is that all actors have responsibilities and rights. It is not about some accountability actors and the others are just doing accountability or just having are under the scrutiny. They always have, everyone has rights and responsibilities, and this is very important also for independent state institutions. Even if they are independent, they have to respect their rules. They have responsibilities. So enough about accountability. Let's try to map the accountability actors, as we said. We know that in the public sphere, rights and responsibilities are always corresponding, and the accountability relation tries to link the rights with the responsibilities. We tried to present the public sphere as a circle. Let's start with the outer circle. Maybe here it's even better visible. The citizens, this is the big circle. This is the basis of the state. Then we have the second circle, which is civil society, the organized citizens around different issues. Their interests, economic interests, the private sector is put here just to show its importance in this public sphere, which is organized around different kinds of issues, interests, and tasks. The NGOs are also part of it. The political parties are also in this meeting. And then we have the state institutions. And they are here in the center, but they are on the basis of the two other circles. What is accountability now? We have different forms of accountability. We have accountability in between the three branches of the state: parliament, government administration, and judiciary. This is a horizontal way of keeping accountability alive. The parliament has its oversight commissions, which are looking at the government, at the administration, at the judiciary. The judicial branch has also its way of looking at the government in accountability forms, horizontal ways. It is also said that horizontal is implying that there are also vertical. This is not so well visible here because we have a circle instead of a hierarchical relation between the state, which is normally seen as the top of the public sphere and the citizens. And all what is going up and down in such a model is seen as vertical. Here, it's just transgressing the circles. NGOs criticizing the government for establishing a landfill in the wrong place. Citizens which are challenging state institutions in different ways by judicial means. There are different ways of vertical accountability. Yes?
Can I just add something?
Mm-hmm. Yes, please.
I'm sorry. In fact, I think you just base it on the classic way of sharing the three basic power in the states, which are the parliament power, the judiciary power, and the government administration power. So I think nowadays there's a fourth power, which is not written in your exposition in this picture, which is the independent institutions, independent agency, like the agency that I'm working in.
You're working in?
Let me just introduce myself. My name is Kouthair Boualleg. I'm from Tunisia, and I'm the Secretary General of the Tunisian Anti-Corruption Agency. This kind of agency, this kind of independent agency, there's several in Tunisia just after the revolution, and this agency took a little bit the power of the government administration, and themselves are becoming a power, independent power, and the power of the states itself.
You're certainly right. I think this is just a model, and it might not even be the correct model for your context or whatever.
I'm not just talking about Tunisia.
And I think
there are several countries in the world who are crossing from this classic model to another model, which gives more power and sharing powers.
This will be also the object of the discussions here. We will go on with this idea of independent institutions. I think, thank you very much. You said an important. You made an important point. You said that this is just the ideal idea of the state which was conceived many years ago. And there are a lot of challenges in power to this. We all know that sometimes it's the political parties, say, influencing very much the state institutions. We had a much more complex slide which showed the relations, the power relations within that. And I think this is very important to see that this is not representing one context. It is an ideal, a typical model of how people conceive accountability situations. And we will be coming back that the independent state institutions may play a very important role in that. Let's come back to accountability subsystems. I think the anti-corruption commissions, they are just looking at, they are getting some very important roles over there. They are creating their own subsystems of accountability. As we said, sometimes they are taking a lot of power. And I think it's not that we should ignore that there's a lot of power questions behind that. I said there are a lot of subsystems. Anti-Corruption Commission is one subsystem of accountability. We can also say there is the international accountability system, which is a system linking the state institutions and the government with the external world. SDG monitoring will be accountability for performing on the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, at an international level. Human rights monitoring at the international level is also a subsystem of accountability which goes out of these circles. We also have within the government a lot of subsystems of accountability. Line ministries are steering and controlling what their units, local units are doing. There's a hierarchy of accountability systems. The police inspectorate, which is controlling what the police people are doing. So a lot of different systems and accountability relations in the big picture. And we have the oversight mechanisms, which are looking at the state from an independent point of view. Most important for me to keep here is to keep in mind here is that accountability is a kind of cooperation between different systems. NGOs controlling and NGOs making reports on police stations are taken up in the parliament. So you have some diagonal forms which are not, the parliament is using vertical institutions, vertical accountability mechanisms for its own horizontal accountability mechanisms. So don't see oversight institutions in isolation. They are always working together. Okay. We have this nice or less nice picture here in this form. You will keep it during the 3 days, so you can come back to it whenever you want. Oversight institutions vary in their forms, in their focus on accountability dimensions. Some oversight institutions, they are very much on the monitoring. You remember these 3 dimensions I said, transparency, answerability, and enforceability. People say that a complete system of accountability is when all dimensions are covered. Oversight institutions vary in their focus. Some, they very much focus on monitoring, investigating, documenting, sharing information. The NGOs who have no power to get an answer sometimes, and they have no power to enforce anything. So they're focusing on this. Oversight institutions of the state, they often are already in the loop of political discussions. They do also monitoring, investigating, but they are much more focusing on requests for information, just asking for justification. Why did the government spend so much money on an issue, on this field, land field or whatever? And this answerability is then very much going into the democratic part of the public sphere. In fact, making democratic decisions is depending on public debate in a democracy. And these accountability mechanisms, they are feeding into a democratic political debate. The last dimension is the most difficult in a way. It's making accountability complete. If you really can enforce decisions against a power holder who did not comply with its responsibility. This is not so much it's not so often the case that independent state institutions have the power to do that. However, there are elements with naming and shaming, using the public opinion to enforce some challenges or some changes of decisions. There are in the election and re-election process, you can enforce someone to admit mistakes and maybe even influence the election results. So there are different ways of how to ensure that this accountability dimensions are covered, and state oversight institutions, be it non-governmental or state institutions, they do have different focus here. And we will see that during the week, I'm sure. So let's come back to the independent state institutions. What are the common features of them? How we can see it now in the beginning of the learning retreat, maybe at the end we will have another list. The common features, in my view, are that they are established by constitution, law, government decision. It's different from NGOs, which are constituting themselves in a different way. Independent state institutions, they are part of the state and they have a mandate. The members are elected or selected by one of the branches. I think even the Anti-Corruption Commission is also linked to the classical branches, even if it takes, in fact, more power. But it is still depending on one of these three branches. There might be a personal mandate, like the ombudsman, or a collective body. Oversight institutions are funded by public budget or sometimes by external funding, development cooperation. Overseeing government administration, judiciary, or performing specific tasks. We saw that this idea of election management is a specific task of the state, which is taken over by an independent organization. And this point, this bullet is very important, I think. The institutions, the state institutions, they do assess performance based on a variety of standards. The financial audit will not look at the same issues when looking at the decision of the government. The human rights institution will have another perspective on the same decision. So they have different reference standards. And so it is sometimes difficult to compare the reports of oversight institutions because they don't have the same criteria to look at after. And they are reporting to the government, parliament, or judiciary. They are still linked to this classical style of state. I think your colleague, he was very much true in saying that the power questions are very important behind that. It's not the same kind of power, of formal power they have, but in fact, they have very much power sometimes. And the real power game is always behind those independent state institutions. Who is selecting them? Who is funding them? Who is commenting the report and who is dismissing them sometimes. So thank you very much. I hope this gave you some starting thoughts about accountability, legitimacy, and the independent state institutions. I think questions are most welcome. Going on your colleagues' comments already.